All right, well, anyways, let's talk about the warrior changes, because there has been quite a few of them. And, well, unironically, this is probably the biggest nerf that we've gotten in quite a while, even though it looks as if we are actually getting buffed. Yeah, that's not really the case. But in any case, let's dive into it with, first of all, a big quality of life update, being that sudden death can stack 2 times. I really like this. I think it's a really good change, especially because it just does very well with Slayer. I think it's good. I really like this. Makes you that you don't always have to spam your sudden death procs instantly. I think it's a very good change. Now, the visuals for Shockwave and for Thunderous Roar, I don't think it's I mean, it's kind of whatever, right? Like, let's be honest. It's nice. It looks cool, but it's kind of whatever. For the gameplay, it doesn't really change anything. So for Mountain Tane, we have a slight name change. Call of Thunder now named Crashing Thunder. Kind of a whatever, but the thing is that Crashing Thunder will now be reduced to 40% instead of 50%, which is a slight nerf to Thunderclap, but I mean, I don't think it's necessarily gonna impact a whole lot in here. What I am more interested about is that they're even more shifting power into Bloodthirst by upping the damage to 35% instead of 25%, and right here on the Strength of the Mountain, also upping that damage on Rampage and Bloodthirst up to 15% instead of 10%. In my opinion, like, they're trying to shift a whole lot into Bloodthirst already this season, and all that they're accomplishing by making these changes is making it even more of a feel bad to press Raging Blow. After what they've done with the Daft experience change, where we're not able to spam Bloodthirst as much anymore as we could in the back in the days, I don't think that this is really nice gameplay design, where one button is just so bad to press that you're gonna try to avoid it at all means possible. Especially whenever you play with like Reckless Abandon and stuff, where it would feel even worse to spend that overpowering or empowered Bloodthirst on a Crushing Blow instead, because it's just going to do significantly less damage. Now, the change itself in terms of doing more with Bloodthirst, I think it's fine, as long as they just give us a little bit more tools to actually play around it. Now for protection, Thunder Blast damage bonus increased to 40% instead of 20%. I feel like this is very unnecessary. I've played with some Prot Warriors before. I feel like Mountain Tane Prot Warrior already does a absolute massive amount of damage. I don't really understand why they're trying to make them even stronger with it. I guess it's gonna be interesting to see in the coming weeks, like how much damage they're actually gonna be able to pull out. But I do remember that whenever we played in some decent AoE dungeons with a Protection Warrior, that they were already very high up the meters with this Thunder Blast. So not really too sure how to feel about that. Now for Slayer, Imminent Demise slightly redesigned. Instead of increasing sudden death's chance to trigger, it now triggers every third time you proc a Slayer Strike. I think this is a really good design. It removes some randomness and it gives some more predictability. I don't really like a whole lot of randomness revolved around random procs and all that type of mumbo jumbo. I think it's really good in order for single target as well, because now you have a way of already building up an Ashen Juggernaut before going to that execute window. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to upkeep it on Fury per se with the amount of haste and stats that we just have at the moment. But I do think that this is actually a pretty cool change, and it will impact our single target quite a lot. Now, we're getting into some more interesting changes with arms, their cleave being replaced by whirlwind. Sorry, whenever you talent into cleave, it will replace whirlwind. Now there is one thing that is really awkward with this, because this is basically gonna make 2 talents completely useless. So if we walk over to the arms tree, we will have 2 talents being Storm of Swords and Merciless Bone Grinder that will absolutely lose all their value. First of all, for Storm of Swords, we have Cleave and Whirlwind having a 30% chance to make your next Cleave and Whirlwind cost 100% less rage. Now that you only can use 1 out of the 2, you basically remove the entire need of running this talent whatsoever, because you do not have the possibility anymore to have it on both of them, but instead on just one. Now, the other change, Merciless Bone Grinder, impacts Whirlwind and Cleave. Now that we only have one of them being impacted rather than two, plus the cooldown on Cleave being increased, meaning that we are able to spend less Cleaves inside of this Merciless Bone Grinder window, making it pretty much a dead talent unless they significantly buff it right now, which I'm not sure if they're gonna do, but if they don't, then they basically just killed two talents. Now, what they're saying in the developers note is that they say that ARMS has an overwhelming number of abilities that they have to use in AoE. I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that the design that we have currently with the amount of buttons actually feels kind of nice because of the way that they changed Tactician and not having that Whirlwind being able to cost a lot of rage, guaranteeing a proc anymore, with Thunderclap not being able to guarantee a proc on Overpower anymore. I always really liked having that extra button in there in order to have some more tools in order to proc Overpowers. Now, they obviously disagree. That's why they made the change, so kind of weird. Here, this is already what I said before. They increased the cooldown of Cleave to 4.5 seconds instead of 3 seconds, making you need to think a little bit more about your rotation, I guess, forcing you to use double Overpower, maybe even another global before using your Cleave. Even further nerfing that MBG window. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to feel about this. I don't necessarily like it too much. I get why they do it, but I don't think that it's a good change. Now, the Dance of Death has been redesigned, and basically, whenever an enemy dies while affected by your Bladestorm, all the damage that you deal is increased by 5% for the remainder of Bladestorm and for 2 seconds after. And when an enemy dies while affected by your Ravager, its duration is extended by 2 seconds. This is completely dead. Like, I understand what they're trying to do with the talent, but it's just completely useless. Like, you will never run this talent. It's horrible in M+, it's horrible in single target. There will never be any way where you will actually run a talent that gets impacted by you killing enemies. Why not? Because whenever you kill an enemy, that means that the rest of the pack is practically dead already as well, or you did something wrong in the first instance and then you have an entire different issue. But other than that, I don't see any world where this would actually be used in any type of way. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I get proven wrong, maybe there's some critter tech or something that I'm unaware of, but yeah, this seems very, very bad. Now, they have changed some of the talent positionings for both Fury and Arms. I don't feel like it has like a whole lot of impact. They made it a little bit more quality of life to get there, I guess. It doesn't really change a whole lot. Now, there is one thing that did change a whole lot, and that is the way that they want Recklessness to work for Fury. And we're getting in something pretty interesting here, because they're really nerfing anger management a lot. Now, first, anger management would reduce the cooldowns of Ravager, Bladestorm, and your Recklessness by 1 second for every 20 rage that you spend, but they are now increasing that rage to 30 rage, which is going to significantly reduce the amount of CDR that you can get on your Recklessness, on your Ravager or Bladestorm, and all that good stuff. Yeah, making you be able to spend less time in Recklessness. Now, the other thing that they nerfed is Unbridled Ferocity. And this is a quite significant nerf, because usually we were able to either use Onslaught or Rampage and have a 20% chance of actually proccing a reduced Recklessness for 4 seconds. They have nerfed this from 20% chance to 6%, and they have also removed the possibility for Onslaught to proc this effect. Meaning that on average, you're gonna need about 18 to 19 Rampages in order for you to proc a 4-second Recklessness. Now, considering that you have about 1.5 minutes of it, you're gonna need to do on average one of them every 19-ish, or one Rampage every 6-ish seconds for it to be worth over The other talent pick that we have being, oh, I'm not in the correct talents anymore, over Depths of Insanity. Depths of Insanity actually already gives you a 4-second flat up buff. I've been trying it out a little bit. It does not seem in M+ scenarios that there's a big difference, especially because you have some downtime with dungeon format, making you not be able to hit all the time, making Depths of Insanity a decent pick as well. Now, moving on, to counter all these changes that they've done, I assume, they have increased all our ability damage by 15%, and they have buffed Rampage by 10%. Now, on paper, this looks like a very, very good buff. And in theory, it is a pretty good buff. However, there is one major downside that is not described in the current development notes, but they have also significantly reduced the amount of armor that we have coming into the expansion. So instead of what we had yesterday being 140,000 armor, we are now at about 51k armor. Now, this does not look like anything that would actually matter. However, we are one of the only classes that are weirdos that have a talent that give us strength equal to our armor. So they have reduced the amount of armor that we go into the expansion with by 90,000 armor. 10% of that was our main stat, meaning that we have lost 9,000 main stat in one night. Now, if you are interested in how much main stat we actually have, currently we're sitting at about 57k main stat, meaning that we have lost over 10% main stat just overnight by a change that would impact no other class than Warrior. So it is very nice that we got a 10% buff on Rampage and a 15% flat buff on all of our other stuff. However, with this main stat nerf, which is probably unintended, and I really hope that they do anything to counter this, because otherwise we are definitely in need of some more tuning before going into the expansion. Yeah, we're kind of screwed. So we are gonna need some serious help to recover from this. I do think that it's an unintended nerf, because they are not really describing it anywhere in the development notes either. They're just trying to squeeze the stats a little bit. However, they have nerfed both Fury and Arms very significantly while doing that. Now, unfortunately, there are still some bugs, meaning that we are not really able to properly test anger management on Slayer just yet. I hope that they're going to fix it over the course of the next day, so we can actually do the M+ beta testing with those talents properly. And that was about it.